Hola amigos, yo soy es Bev Boys.
That's right. Welcome back to Bet Boys, guys. Your one-stop shop for your reviews and performance talks. I'm Christian,
I'm Brian.
and we're the Bet Boys. Not gonna lie, that caught me a little off guard. Brian said he was gonna get the intro, and then he hit me with that shit. But all good, all good. Um, yeah, I have a feeling we're gonna have another solo episode, or really duo episode today. No guest. So I think
Yeah,
it's gonna be another. To start off, though, I gotta share something. I got a little story to tell. So. As you know, the energy drinks are a bit scarce down here, but I might have hit the theoretical jackpot. So I'm just gonna go ahead and show this.
oh,
Got a white monster here for us all. Now it's just a regular white monster. Labels in Spanish, which is kind of cool. Sin azúcar, zero sugar, taurine, and L-carnitine. Pretty simple there. Funny story about this is So I was talking to our athletic trainer. So shout out Leroy for this one. And he was like, I saw he had like a white monster in his fridge. I'm like, Leroy, you better drink that before I steal it. Like, it's been in here for weeks. I don't know how you have the discipline to not just crush that thing. He's like, oh, I'm saving it for a rough day. And I'm like, okay. And then all of a sudden one day I go into work and he's like, I there's one of these on my desk, just a white monster. And I was like, what the hell? I knew it was him, and I was like, "Did you get this for me?" He's like, "Yeah." I was like, "Where'd you find it?" Because I was figuring he said, "No, I had to go all the way to the Capitol, this random store." He's like, "I found it at the Olay." And the Olay is basically the local grocery store, the one that I walk to. It's 5 minutes from my apartment. Um, it's super small, not the best grocery store. Like I only get certain things from there. Definitely would not trust the meat from there, me personally. Um, but I'm like, where is it? Like I've looked at all the drinks. He's like, oh yeah, like they're in the alcohol section. And I just felt I felt dumb, but I was like, damn, that's so on brand for me. Like
to never even
there
look.
yeah, I was like to never look at the alcohol section, but he's like, yeah, like I think people just drink them like in mixers, like with booze. So sure enough, I went there yesterday. I went to the alcohol section. They're just sitting there with like some of the sugar-free Red Bulls, some like the summer edition Red Bulls, stuff like that. But yeah, just bought like four of them. I will definitely be, it's a blessing and a curse. Probably be spending a lot of money on these, but they are super cheap. 115 pesos, which comes out to like $1.85. It's a freaking
Get
steal, dude.
get 100 of them.
I know. I was like, I'm gonna buy out the store. So yeah, man. Hopefully this. It's wild that I just never even like glanced over there. It's
You've
funny
just
though.
been
It's so
sitting
on
on a
brand
gold
for
mine.
me.
Yeah.
I know. So, but yeah, got a white monster. So happy about that. I'm about to just pop that top. No need to wait. Oh yeah,
Oh, that's solid. Um, take a sip of that for me. I know that's gonna feel golden.
that's right. Those of you
I
that used to watch OG Chris Jones and Pump Chasers know.
I got a little something too now that you mentioned sugar-free Red Bull. I went to Harris Teeter, which is grocery store in North Carolina, around the
Much
south
better
here.
than Olay.
Much better than Olay. They had two different flavors. They had I think it was a spring edition, and it was like June. There was a Juneberry one, I think is their summer one. There was this green can, and it was like something and like hibiscus, and I just didn't quite kind of catch my eye. And then this extremely Easter colored can caught my eye. A new, what appears to be new Red Bull pink edition. So the pink edition is wild berries. So
Multiple.
they did have them on sale 2 for $5, so at least that was a nice little steal. Typical Red Bull type of deal on it though: 10 calories, 2 grams of carbs, 80 milligrams of caffeine on an 8.4 fluid ounce can. But obviously the sick top on there with the embroidered top, just like Monster does. But without further ado, oh,
Wild berries does sound good.
Ooh, ooh, mm, ooh.
Control yourself, Brian, please.
It's different. It's not what you expect. It's definitely a pink liquid, though, if you can kind of see it on the
Oh boy,
spill alert. Little
that
drippage.
guy, this boy
Mm.
drinking, that boy drinking straight Pepto Bismol on the pod.
Let me get this for
Butcher in
us.
the future. Double,
Let
double,
me.
double styrofoam cup.
Oh,
Oh,
had to get some. Had to clean that up. Little spillage.
spillage, no problem, no problem.
Everybody likes it when the desk is moist.
Yeah, man, we do this raw. We do this raw and uncut. No stuff getting into that. So,
Mm. Still pretty good though. Very, ironically, like very floral. I know
okay,
Red Bull's done this before, where like a lot of their stuff has like herbal or like floral kind of flavors with their stuff. It's
okay.
like it's like a very light raspberry hibiscus, which not bad for a nice spring day. It's like what, like 63 degrees today in North Carolina. Never mind, it's 41. It feels like 63 though. I'll be honest. The sun is out.
Well,
I walk the dogs.
if we average out with my temperature at 84, then we'll meet in the middle at about 60. So,
Yeah, 62, 63. There we go.
UV's 10 right now. Glad I'm not outside.
Yeah, dude, you'll be baking in the sun. But we got a couple of topics to talk about today. We talked a little bit pre-show in our staging process. I don't know if you guys know this, but obviously our studio is no longer with us, so we are the studio ourselves.
Right.
um,
Rigorously organized with this operation here, obviously.
we
Huberman Lab took it from us, his all.
the lighting.
We do this shit off the rip. For the most part. For the most part. But we do have some good topics today. So, Brian, you wanna start us off here?
Yeah. My first one. It's something that's been bugging me for a little bit. Not, I don't know which argument on the side of it is correct or not, but it's on the topic of specialty bars, right? Are specialty bars worth it? Right now, I am not here to argue that they do or don't do what they're intended to do. I love a good specialty bar. I'm going to start this off by saying that. I love an SSB, a good one. I love a good trap bar. A camber bar is sick, a Swiss bar, I totally understand.
Tsunami Bar.
Tsunami bar. Are they a necessity? Like, are these things that we have to have, or can we get by with whatever kind of uh, addition or reduction on a regular, 28.5 millimeter barbell, whether it be multi-use, a power bar, whatever it is? Do we need a specialty bar, or do we really want a specialty bar? If that makes sense, you know what I mean? Like, I I get do you regular deadlift somebody, sumo deadlift them, or you just not deadlift at all, or do you get a trap bar? You know, do you have enough problems with back or low back with a traditional like barbell squat, whether it be front squat or back squat, whatever it might be, that you necessitate an SSB of sorts to have that camber sit in the right way. Obviously, there's a hand supported argument where it frees your hands up and you can grab the rack or anything to support yourself and add additional load. But are they truly a necessity? It kind of goes back to me, for me, like the same thing of, is someone really an advanced athlete? Or does the simple stuff work really well? You know, what's your take on it? I mean, obviously you guys use specialty bars down there in the DR. You guys have trap bars that I've seen you load 700 on. Obviously, the SSBs that you're using with the Rogue ones, those are nice. But what's your take here, man?
Yeah, I mean, short answer, no, I don't think you absolutely need them. And people, it's pretty obvious that like most people when they start lifting, they start off with the barbell or dumbbells. I think that's like a really good base for people when they start off. And if you can only pick one bar, I'm gonna pick just a straight barbell. But obviously, if we can get some specialty bars, it's probably more optimal. Um, it's tough because I think you can get away with, you know, not to sound like an old head, but like if you just want to use a straight bar and just squat, bench, dead and do different variations. There's a lot of variations you can do there. You can do loaded jumps with them. You can do pressing. You can do pulling. You can pull from the floor. You can do, explosives with your Olympic derivatives and your Olympic lifts. You can squat. You can do multiple variations in front rack, back rack, zercher, um, unilateral work. But I do think it's tough to say if they're like necessary or not, because if you have guys that are healthy, don't have any issues, which is rare that hopefully most of your athletes are healthy, but like
It's not often that you're going to have that.
yeah,
Something will
yeah,
happen.
right. Something will happen. And I think also for like variation's sake, even though I just literally to contradict myself, I literally just said you can get a ton of variations with the straight bar, which you can, but um, throwing in variation like with a trap bar versus a straight bar deadlift. And like you said, like the hand supported argument with the SSB bar, I think if you can, obviously like everyone probably starts off with a barbell. I remember with Simpson, like Sam's first purchase was getting a bunch of those Rogue safety bars because he knew that that was going to be a big part in our program. Was like heavy unilateral work, split squat work. And I think if you ever worked with like really tall athletes, basketball players, even like we'll get baseball players, pitchers especially that are super tall. I mean, there's just some movements that from their anatomy, it's just going to be a lot tougher for them to do instead of learning a little bit. So like, I know the trap bar gets shit on by some people, but sometimes that's just better for the athlete. That doesn't mean I never put them on a straight bar. You can elevate them on the blocks. And I mean, a lot of times people just, if they've never been taught a straight bar, it could be like a mobility issue or just uh, getting used to the fact that you're going to feel your lower back a lot more than you are at a trap bar deadlift. It's actually like a true hinge versus a squat, more of a squatting pattern. But there's certain ones that I think are more useful and certain ones where it's like, yeah, they're cool, they're sick to mess around with. But they probably, you might use them for one or two of your guys, like a tsunami bar is what I'm thinking of. Now, I don't know a ton about, I know there's some research out there with like tsunami bars being like, okay, like the ground reaction forces are greater when the load's equated from a straight bar because of that, because they bend a bunch. But they're like $700. They're really expensive. And you can do everything and probably more with a straight bar for a lot less money. And you probably don't need to use that kind of stuff until you're a little bit more advanced. So I think like trap bar and safety bar, especially like safety bar, like if someone has like a shoulder injury, they're coming off a surgery, something like that, or like you might have guys that are just big as fuck, and they can't really get into that back position. It's a good and a bad problem to have. And just be more comfortable from the safety bar position. And it also comes into to play like personal preference. This is one thing that I've been kind of opening up a little bit to is like if we need guys to squat, do they all need to be doing the same squat variation? Yes, I would like them to all learn like certain movements, but like if we have a safety bar squat programmed and some guy just really hates the safety bar and wants to just go straight back squat or vice versa, you're kind of getting the same pattern and that gives that optionality. Maybe they're probably going to have a little bit more intent and they're going to buy in a little bit more to the program if you give them a little bit of autonomy. So to summarize this rant, and then I'll let you talk, they aren't, but they are. And I think there's certain bars that are obviously a little bit more versatile and like people just use more often. Like you see strength coaches using straight bars, safety bars, and trap bars probably a lot more than tsunami bars, camber bars, open trap bar you can put in the same category as a trap bar in my opinion. Yeah, I'm just gonna leave it at that.
Okay, I'm going to follow this up because I want to hear your point on this. Okay, say our space and our money are equivalent. It doesn't matter. Those options, that doesn't matter. Are you getting the specialty barbells, or are you going to move to more of a specialty machine like a Rhino or a belt squat of some sorts, a leg press machine, a hip thrust machine, even just like a hammer strength row? Or I mean, we all know that, and one of our previous guests, Gabe, that man will die for a hammer strength rower. You know, if you have the money and you have the funds, are you going for the machine or are you going for the specialty barbell? And the space isn't going to matter because they'll clear out a wall and do whatever. I feel like I don't know. What's your thought process? Because for me, I think I might actually lean more towards the machine.
Yeah, I think if I don't have like a belt squat, something to do with squatting pattern without axial loading, besides like a trap or deadlift, if you really want to get, you know, split hairs here, I think I'd probably go for like a belt squat. And I think when I think of specialty bars, like you don't need one for every single rack. Like, you know, when I first got there, we had like a few safety bars, like three or four, you know, fine. We had a trap bar for every rack, but like some safety, like I think with like safety bars especially, like unless that's really going to be like a main stake in your program, just having a few of those and then taking care of like the machine action is probably better because if we're doing get the safety bar for the reason of okay, guys with shoulder problems can use it coming off of surgery, the belt squat probably does that better in my opinion because it takes away like the stability aspect, you know.
There's
It,
truly no shoulder or back loading with
right, yeah,
a belt squat.
it's yes, and then there's people that have you know they're having back issues too. So that's a good question. I would say for the belt squat, that's like a machine where it's like, okay, like that is pretty versatile for me. That or even like a leg press, depending on, you know, some people like a leg press more, some people like a
Pendulum squat.
pendulum squat. Yeah. Get Alan Bishop on, get you an Atlantis pendulum squat.
That would be sick. I would love to have one of those. But I agree. I think I lean if everything is equivalent and it's not about money or space, I think I lean towards the machine because the machine will offer for that whatever most likely for whatever you're going for with the specialty bar. You get that with a lower risk, quote unquote, and you can also cater to other issues that may be about it. Like in the terms of like you mentioned with the safety squat bar, it'll truly unload the shoulder, but you also get your back people so they can't axial load. Boom. Now we have two of those things. Number three, you probably have different options that you can use that belt squat for whatever, whether it be hinge patterns, whether it be marches, whatever, you have that option. Same thing with like a leg press. You can go to truly unilateral, no axial loading, and you can probably work through a bigger range of motion in some cases with a higher increased load because it's not going to be a stability aspect. All those different pieces. And then if you look towards, like, I say, a Swiss bar or a football bar, you can multi-grip it. But any of those press machines, as anyone knows, you have probably 3 or 4 different grips on a press machine or something with a multiple like Versa grip on there, or even just grabbing the actual arms themselves and sitting in that neutral position versus like a locked this way or that way. So I float towards like give me a plate loaded machine.
Right. Yeah. It's tough because this is like it's an
It's
obvious answer, but it's not an obvious answer because
yeah.
it's always in context. Like if you already have a couple of specialty bars and you don't and you use them pretty sparingly and you don't have a belt squat or something like that where it's like damn like there's a lot of situations where this is handy for me and that's probably your answer versus if you're if you're a coach that really like values a certain movement on a specialty bar, that's what you want to base your program around, and you don't have any of them, then you probably can go with that. And maybe
Mm-hmm.
you do have like a machine or something. So yeah, that's a good question. Rolling off of that, you mentioned, I think you just mentioned like risk versus reward, ROI. So let's roll into a question I have about that is I think you hear a lot of coaches talk about ROI. They'll say like, oh, the ROI on this exercise or this certain thing just isn't. It's better than this one, or it isn't as good. The risk versus reward. And a lot of times, I think it comes down to like certain exercises. People will talk about it with like movements that often get demonized, like bar deadlift, um, even like back squats, stuff like that. Could be something on the field, but I usually hear it with more in the weight room.
Mm-hmm.
We had a pretty good we had a good discussion within our staff about this, and there's a video that I would recommend people watching. If you know who Marcus Bradley is he made a video on basically like he thinks the ROI risk versus reward thing is kind of a fallacy and he outlined a few good points. Basically, I think one point that he made was like, okay, like bench press is more risky, quote unquote, than like, okay, why don't we just do like landline press or weighted push ups or dumbbell press, stuff like that. And you can say, oh, like people get hurt more on the bench press, but you can overload the bench press more and people's egos get involved in the bench press more. I'm not going to go and brag my friends about, oh, this landmine press, like 3 plates or man, that dumbbell bench, my dumbbell bench goes crazy. Like people get excited with stuff like that. That's one reason. And then we kind of forget about the fact that in the scheme of things, the weight room is like the least risky part of an athlete's training. Like,
Mhm.
there was a study that compared like injuries per 1,000 hours, and it compared like a bunch of different sports, and then like weightlifting, powerlifting, and like general resistance training, and like all the lifting stuff, like Olympic weightlifting, powerlifting, general like weight training, was way at the bottom, and then the actual sports like American football, soccer,
Rugby.
rugby, all this like gymnastics. You're like the things we do in the weight room, especially in the weight room, are the least risky things that that athlete does within their training. So I think that's another. I think it comes from a good place. Like most arguments, like coaches want to be like, okay, like my job is to prevent, prevent or reduce mitigate injury and improve performance. So that's
Mm.
they kind of would rather play it safe. Um, I think that works because I mean training is better than not training. But I think people get kind of held back and are afraid to try certain exercises or implement things because they're going to be afraid, oh my God, if I do this, everyone's back is just going to be hurt or this and that. So what do you think about the whole risk versus reward argument? I think people just kind of say it because they haven't always thought through of, okay, why don't I want to do this? Am I just being closed minded and don't want to, comprehend? Like, I don't want to face the fact that I haven't really thought through this and I don't have a thorough understanding of what the risk versus reward actually means in this situation. What are your thoughts?
What I'm about to say is probably going to piss a lot of people off.
Perfect. That's what we're trying to do here.
If you want to make
I
an
agree.
omelet, if you want to make an omelet, you got to crack a few eggs. And it's unfortunate, but it's true. I don't care. That's the way it is. Following that up, though, how you load something and the context around it is far more important than whatever it is that you're loading, right? If I
Completely.
if I put you on a bench press and I say you're going at 65% or say, 1 meters per second and you're going as fast as possible until we have a velocity drop off, that's more important than if I say, and we're going to do weighted push-ups and you're going to put 4 plates on your back and we're going to go an AMRAP set, right? The context surrounding the movement of what's your sets, what's your reps, which I hate just sets and reps talk, but the loading parameters, the speed at which it moves, and what we're doing it with and the time of the year, that's far more important than what happens. Now, with that being said, I think a lot of people get so scared of a particular movement because XYZ. It needs to become less about the risk inhibition and more so about what are we desiring to get out of this movement, right? I'm not a back squat fan. I think it ends up most of the time, especially with athletes who are not super advanced, even in general population, it ends up being a really, really ugly good morning because the knees extend and then it becomes fully just a hip hinge with the bar loaded on the back, right? I think it leads to a lot of low back issues chronically, not just acutely. I think it's more of a chronic problem than an acute problem. So therefore, I like the front squat. But if I want absolute load on the body, I'm probably going for a back squat instead of a front squat. The front squat is limited by the front rack, right? Now, I like the idea of it being limited on the front rack. I like that movement better because then I don't see a shitty good morning. I see them drop the barbell and it goes to the spotter arms instead. That's me. Am I scared of the risk? No. Do I not like the movement in general? Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, but those are two
But
different things.
those are two
And you
different
thought,
things.
and as you just stated, you thought through that and you just gave your reasoning, which is people can
Yeah,
give different reasonings. I think the main thing is what I'm trying to get at is like,
yeah,
are you actually thinking through your process? Do you have,
exactly.
are you actually trying to think critically about
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what it is. And it's the same thing of like when people say like I don't want to sprint at 100% for an extended number of reps, right? Because then I risk the hamstring. That's great. But if that's the case, then you'll never sprint. And the first time that they're exposed to that is probably within a game. And if they're exposed to a brand new stimulus in an uncontrolled environment that's never been replicated, they're more likely to have an injury, right? Your injury risk does inherently go up at that point because we've never prepared them for that. Now, thankfully, in a weight room, most of that stuff that you're doing in the weight room doesn't appear on the field, on the court, or on the track, right? Unless it's like a jump or something. And then even then, you're probably not doing it with some dumbbells in your hands. But I think coaches use the argument of it's too risky instead of just saying, fuck it, let's try it, let's see what it works. Now, I'm not saying throw this in season on that model, but I think if you spend some time and teach a movement, whether it be like a conventional clean grip deadlift or like a sumo deadlift, whatever it is in the off season, take your time and do it. Go for it. Now, I'll be honest with you. Hearing myself say that is like, well, then why don't I do Olympic lifts? I'm more so on that aspect, right? Same with the arguments, like I just don't. And I think that's where people need to be in that frame of reference of like, I just don't because I just don't see the value in it. Not it's too risky and like it's okay to say you don't find value in something versus trying to point the blame on it of like it's a risky movement, right? If you have some evidence and you have a thought process of why you think something might be better, that's fine. I think you can use that evidence, whether it be power output, whether it be ease of use, setup, teaching, etc., whatever it might be. But I don't think blaming a movement to be inherently like bad for the health, especially when it's like just a pattern of movement wherever we put the barbell, whether it be a Zercher or a back squat in this case, and saying like, well, this is going to hurt the back. I've seen some people hurt their backs on a Zercher too because they're trying to like hold that spot, right? You can get hurt any way you flip it, as long as if all it takes is one mental mistake.
Yeah, you're gonna like. I saw a good Instagram post about that. It was a while ago, but it was basically like if like you're going to get hurt regardless. If you're an athlete or a regular person, like you're probably going to get hurt regardless. You're probably going to get hurt less and to a less severe extent if you actually train and expose your body to stuff versus just like say, okay, I'm going to play it safe and just never leave my house. And then you're going to get hurt in a lot more embarrassing way, in a less cool story at least. And it's also a good point you brought up about, if you got to make an omelet, you got to crack a few eggs. I remember when I was an intern at Sac State, Coach Dietrich he basically told me, he's like, yeah, like, because they train fucking hard. And like, he's like, yeah, like, we probably dig up a few more guys than other programs. But to me, it's worth it for that extra push that I think we get. And like, not to say it was direct correlation, but they won 3 straight Big Sky championships, and now he's at Stanford. So that's a good point made there. And then the volume being the biggest aspect versus the movement. Totally agree with that. I'm actually reading the book The System by Johnny Parker right now. Really good book if you haven't read it. And it talks about it says the volume is the biggest and most important variable. Basically, like sets, reps, and intensity. That's a more important variable than the exercise selection and the frequency, all that stuff.
Your your acute to chronic workload capacity or thresholds, those will probably point you in far more directions on predicting an injury than any movement that you're doing. Obviously, the biggest predictor of an injury is a prior injury,
Yes.
right? Outside of those true like non-negotiable outliers, and I say outliers in the aspect of like, hey, this guy's had 3 hamstrings, he's probably going to get another one, right? Your acute to chronic workload, do you spike it? Are you above that 10% or are you riding chronically high are you super low and you're about to see a spike, whether they're going from an off season into a camp, whatever it might be. That is more important than whatever movement you choose, because the hour that you're spending in there, in that weight room, say in the off season, you're in there, what, 2 to 4 times a week, maybe five. Five is probably aggressive, in all honesty. I think I've been in multiple places, and even if they're in there a fifth day, it's probably like some kind of like light, super aerobic based work just to promote some kind of blood flow. I don't want to say recovery workout because that's an oxymoron, but the volume at which you do something, the total load, that tonnage, whether it, or even just the sprint volume or the tempo volume, number of contacts, whatever, far more important. That's your biggest key indicator of, hey, are we looking like we're probably in a higher likelihood, because you can't truly predict as a real injury will come, whether it be soft tissue, bone, or anything like that. That volume will be your direction and your arrow that's going to say, hey, XYZ in this probably week span, if we're going to get it, we're going to get it there. You can't look at a lift card and be like, hey, they did leg press and then they did some rear foot elevated split squats. That's probably going to make that happen, right? It's like, no, they just did 10 by 10 German volume training, and I'm asking them to get out there tomorrow and run 300 meters of sprints. That's probably going to tell you, the loading capacity and parameters are more important.
Yeah. And workload's an interesting, like a lot of people are starting to pay attention to workload. It's getting thrown around a lot. And rabbit hole definitely goes deep on that one too. Like if you just look up into like allostatic load, not even like in sport, but that's basically like the stress on the body from literally everything, physical, psychological, inside stressors, outside stressors. I'm not going to say it's impossible. It's really hard to track all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But if we can track the physical stuff, I agree with you. Like that acute to chronic, and I'm biased because we use this a lot. And I feel like a lot of the coaches that have been around have told me that this is important, and I do think it's important. I think that is I agree with you, that's a big indicator of like risk of injury. And some people can tolerate a little bit more than others. If you look at the research, there's kind of like that buffer zone, and some people can be in that buffer zone and be fine. Some guys, when they get over that, that 1.2 or whatever, the 1.2 mark, are at a pretty high risk. And you kind of get to see who those guys are. If you're able to track stuff like Catapult is big for us. I think in the future of sports performance, there's going to be a way where people try to figure out allostatic load from on-field stuff combined with weight and stuff, tonnage lifted, potentially, the psychological piece is probably the toughest because we know the least amount about it. But I think like that's kind of the direction we're trending as far as like sports science is. How can we measure like overall workload of any area, and how can we get closer to that to try to predict quote unquote injuries?
And you've seen it a lot, I think, like with like wearables in the past 5 years, right? And I'm not a big wearables guy, just because I think it's super unpredictable. Something's going to be inflated, and like most of the time people wear a wearable for like calories burned or whatever. But like HRV is going to be like one of those big ones. Whereas like if that HRV is bigger, that means that your like highs are high and your lows are super low. You're recovering super well. Whereas the smaller that is, that means we're closing that gap. But nothing's been perfected as of yet in order to give you the truest number based on where you wear it, on that heart rate variance, and where you're moving with it. But everyone's trying to figure out how to get that allostatic load, like you mentioned, and measure that stress of what's your normal day look like in comparison to when you actually physically exert yourself, and have that piece, and what's your sleep look like. It's just so hard, and it's like some of those wearables you can't, that might be a little bit more accurate while you're working out. That's probably not something that you're going to wear during the day, like a polar heart rate strap, or like an Omega Wave. They're really great when you work out, but are you really going to wear that strap all day, every day, everywhere? No, but how do we consolidate?
That's why you got to get a Whoop.
See, but like for me, I look at the Whoop and I'm like, well, it's not super accurate because it's not sitting on like a major vein or artery to actually pull that blood flow. And then the Oura Ring, people don't really use it right all the time. So
Right.
it's like, how do we get that data, this data, and this data all to combine and flow to one, quote unquote AMS system, and have that flow for the individual, even on like a regular basis, who just trains and wants to optimize, quote unquote, just throwing buzzwords around right now, but optimize their lifestyle. It's really hard. And not everybody has that skill set, nor do they have the time. But it's so difficult. And figuring that piece out, if someone does that, they're going to make a lot of money.
Yeah. And another thing is there's a ton of shit that we don't know. And when something happens, like an injury in sport, or just anything like dramatic event in history, we usually try to make sense of it to make ourselves feel better. If you read in the Nassim Taleb book, uh, he's big on this. Like, we want to make ourselves feel better, so we try to make sense of like why something happened, and then we are like, okay, this is why it happened. Now this won't happen again. When really that's kind of the premise of a black swan. Like, it's an event with major consequences, positive or negative, that you don't see coming, and it's kind of unsettling to accept the fact that like there's just stuff that comes out of nowhere, and like you could be managing your workload perfectly, quote unquote, doing everything right, and people are still going to get hurt. That's just the chaos of life, complexity theory, if you will. If we want to get really deep into this, it's beyond the scope of my knowledge currently, but that's another thing, man. But it doesn't mean that they stop trying to figure out more ways to help, predict, if you will.
I agree. And it's just like you mentioned, like with the Black Swan event, like people want to feel comfort and be like, if and make it black and white of it's always going to be gray. Just because this person got punched doesn't mean that the next time someone gets punched, they're going to go out and do X, Y, Z the same way. It's like the structure at which, the nature versus nurture, how they grew up, the environment that they were in, what's their initial reaction, have they had past history of reactions in such way. There's so much stuff that goes into every human organ. And this is like a big thing too, is that humans are inherently flawed. We're a perfect organism in the aspect of we are flawed. No two person will have the exact same reaction to one thing based off of just that close, 10-minute event. All the different pieces come into that reaction. And that's a different like chaos theory. And that's you mentioned above your head, like that one's above my head for sure. But
Yeah, good thing to think about though. Thought provoking for sure.
yeah.
Um, to switch topics a little bit here. Here's another one that's kind of been circulating. Not that it hasn't before, but I feel like it's coming around a little bit again. Does your physique or physical ability matter as a strength coach, or just a fitness professional, and to what extent? So we could ruffle some feathers. That's all good.
Yes. But that's yes, but right. I don't think every coach has to have a 6-pack or an 8-pack and look like Chris Bumstead, like you're ready to step on stage, or look like Mike O'Hearn, who's definitely natural. Mike O'Hearn is definitely natural. He's definitely not on steroids, guys.
Obviously, he said he was natural, so he
He
is.
said you have to believe him, but you don't have to look like him. But you have to be able to demonstrate what you're trying to get the athletes to do. And here's why. A, if you're going to ask someone to do something that's complex, you better be able to put your money where your mouth is. B, the second aspect is whether you like it or not, optics are a thing. Optics are a thing. If I'm a big, fat, 500-pound dude and I'm like, you guys got to run harder, right? And I'm telling a bunch of 19-year-old guys who look, like Division I football players or Division I track athletes, whatever it might be, and they're looking at me like, this fat fuck just told me I need to run harder. Boom, you lost the room. You do it just for the sake of, and I hate to be a culture guy. I'm not really a culture guy, but like, you got to get buy-in. If you can't put your money where your mouth is, boom, right? And then like this is another aspect too, is some people are kinesthetic learners, some people are auditory, some people are visual learners, right? So you have to be able to describe what you're doing. You have to be able to walk them through what they need to do. And some people just need to see what it looks like in a good manner, right? That's part of my role when we get on field stuff with football, right? You've seen it when you were there. Nick's like, Brian, get out there and demo the dribbles, right? I got to show them what it looks like to look good, or the bounds, or the sprints, or whatever it might be. It's like some guys need to see that so they know what it should look like, and then they can do it. And then I can describe to them, hey, this is what it should feel like. Boom. Well, now it's like 1, 2, 3 different ways of learning, and that motor learning and motor development all come together, right? Plus, I mean, sometimes you just need to be able to juice up a team. You know what I mean? Like you're sitting in a weight room and, everyone's a little dead. It's a long practice. And you're like, all right, move over. Let me hit a jump on the jump mat. How many times have we done that one before? Where we're like, let me see what I can do. You rip a big one and then they're like, well, I want to try and beat coach, and then they get into that. I don't think you have to be the most physically gifted specimen. I think you should take care of yourself and be able to train and challenge yourself just as you ask your athletes to, just for the sake of being able to demonstrate or be challenged. Because there's inherently going to be a spot where a kid's like, you can't even do that. And it's like, well, I'm going to step up and do it. I cracked a 500-pound deadlift cold in jeans and Vans during a cross-country lift because they said I couldn't. I definitely no warm up. Definitely had to sit down after the session. Was like, I think I blew my back out, but I got it, and we got a lot out of that session afterwards. But that stuff, it does matter, and I it's unfortunate, but it's true. And just for those reasons that I've kind of offered up, I think that you should. Now, caveat, flip side, you need to know why you're doing that stuff. You can't just be, this is where I think a lot of people lose it. And they think, well, they were a really good athlete, they're going to be a great coach. Two vastly different things. Give me a coach who knows the ins and outs of every single thing and can at least do it to the best of their ability 50%, than someone who doesn't have any idea and they're throwing shit on a shingle, but they can demo everything great. You got to be able to be a weapon on both sides of that. And unfortunately, I think it's true that a lot of the times, really good athletes aren't the best coaches, mainly because they've never been challenged and had to figure stuff out. They're so gifted as an athlete or whatever it might be. It all kind of comes together, and they never really had to break things down, isolate pieces, or really learn how to do it. It just happened. So they can't teach someone else how to do it. They're just like, well, go do it. It should just make sense. All that to say, yes, I think it does matter, at least a little bit. And Mike O'Hearn's definitely not on steroids. He's natural. He said so. What about you?
Yeah, I agree. I think it matters. Like you said, be an elite physical specimen, because not everyone can be an elite physical specimen, because you pick the wrong parents. You're just kind of shit out of luck. I think it doesn't need to be, I know a lot of people like to train the same way that their athletes do, and I feel like I do that to an extent. But it doesn't have to be. Obviously, I agree with you on the fact that you need to be able to demo everything that you probably ask of someone to do. Does that mean you need to be able to do a 40-inch vertical and a sub 1 fly 10? No, but be able to do what you're asking them to do. I think that's really important for me right now, especially as I'm still learning. And last year, 100%, when I first got down here and knew pretty much no Spanish, that was all I could do. So that was really important for me. And like you said, some people just learn better from seeing it done. But I think, I think about Nick. He doesn't, I mean, that motherfucker trains hard, but he does CrossFit. A lot different than football training, but he can still, he's still really strong.
He can still hop into whatever, and
exactly.
At least at the very minimum, get by to show him what it should look like.
Exactly. I think if you have your own, people coaches and just like adults in general have their own performance goals sometimes. Like if you want to, marathon run, that's also cool. Like,
Hmm.
marathon running has a little resistance training, so you can still, but like just because it's also kind of badass to be like, hey, like I know I'm skinny, but I can run 100 miles. Like I think that'll help get buy-in. Um,
Hmm.
like you said about being 500 pounds, maybe not be that big, but like if you're huge like that, but you're competing like the world's strongest man, stuff like that, or
Like
like
John Heck.
exactly, or like if you're like
He's
a world class powerlifter, like
yeah.
athletes coming all shapes and sizes.
You're gonna get someone that's like this guy's like I say guys because it's us, but like you'll get an athlete that's like this guy is into some he's into this shit, like he cares, you know?
Yes,
And that will give you buy-in and you're better off, you have a better chance of winning the room, so why not set yourself up from success, right? Than if you're a very soft-spoken, mousy individual, probably overweight, whatever it might be. It's really hard to get someone to trust you that we all have that personal biasy of like, well, how are they going to tell me what the fuck to do if they can't do this shit themselves?
yeah, and
It's tough.
yeah, the optics play a big role, and I think you were talking about being able to have the look, but also being able to talk the talk. Unfortunately, while I agree that that's ideal, I think people get more buy-in when they look the part but can't talk the talk versus
Hmm.
knowing a lot but don't look the part, which is
I agree.
unfortunate. But I think that's how it is, 100%. Like,
I agree.
um,
It's like the
and you
same
should,
thing if, oh, go ahead.
I was just saying, you should strive to have both. But like,
Yeah.
I mean, look at the fitness industry. You have a lot of people out there that just look really good. Maybe they know stuff about training, maybe they don't. But they're getting a lot of business. They're getting a lot of attention versus guys that are probably smarter than everyone else, but no one knows about them because you know they
They
don't
don't
look like they
have,
train. Yeah,
they don't have, 1,100 nanomoles per deciliter of trend going through their,
exactly.
um, but yeah, I mean, you're right though. It's like, you will get more buy-in. It's like you look at, and I not to demonize like Division I football, but a lot of their training looks the same, right? A lot of like Division I Power Four football facilities. If you walk in, it looks like the same kind of lift. You have one day where you're gonna clean and squat, and then you have one day where you're probably gonna bench and then row heavy, and then you're gonna do some tempos. You're gonna sprint. Now, is it basic? Yeah. Does it work? Probably. Um, but do a lot of them have, and I'm not saying that they're all idiots. I don't think they are. They got to where they are for some reason. Did they probably get a lot of it by because they look juiced? Like you look at a lot of Division I football guys, they look like they fit a certain mold. That's what they want, right? Now I think there's some of them that are absolute geniuses. Look at the staff that Alabama has right now. I mean, they have I think 3 or 4 previous head S&C coaches on staff, 2 of which are just essentially like advisors to the head coach, which is insane. Director of high performance, and they lost one of their head strength coaches now with the Saints. Like that's a like they look the part. They clearly have the thought process. Like just hearing them speak about ideas and thoughts, they have both. That's what you should strive for. But that's not the case everywhere else. Whereas you might get a very loud, boisterous person who is super jacked but doesn't really know, and they're like, "Well, I've seen someone else do this. That's how we're gonna do it." It's unfortunate, but it's true. But they're gonna make 250 per year and get to go to a bowl game because they have great recruiting. It's just how it
Yeah,
is.
yeah. And I don't think like I'm not complaining about that at all. To quote Gabe, like you got to play the game.
You
Like
got to.
you got to play the game, and that's multifactorial. You got to try to be the best you can at every single thing that you can. And it's kind
Mm-hmm.
of uncomfortable to think about because it's a lot, but better to confront it than to be a person that's like, oh, well, if I looked like this, if I did this, like I would be in this position. Like no one cares about that. You're just participating in the victim Olympics. Um,
Exactly. Like if you want that, then you have to play the game, whether you like it or not. That's what they're looking for. You should go get all the knowledge you can and be the most intellectual weapon that you can be, and then fit that mold that they're looking for, if that's what your goal is.
Right. And if you can't look exactly like those people or whatever, getting at least like trying to look like that is probably going to get you further than just sitting and complaining. In fact, I know it will. So
Yeah.
always better to try than not try,
Yeah.
basically.
You have to, right? It's part of the game. Get some tattoos, get super jacked, and hopefully be, blessed with good
Smart.
parents and be over 6 feet. And
Yeah.
then, and if you're super smart too, then you're probably Scott Kuhn and you're at LSU being a sports scientist and probably looking like a body of an Adonis, not to go all out on the guy, but 6 foot plus, jack, tattoos, beard, and he's super smart. That's what you should be. If you want to go be
Exactly.
Power 5, go be that.
Exactly. And if you can't do some of them, like if you can't do the 6 feet thing, just try to fill in all the other bit. Like,
Yeah.
I got to get some tattoos. Like, sure as hell ain't growing up. I'm growing out, if anything.
Yeah.
I'm done growing up.
Oh.
I think we got one more topic that we want to touch on. I think I know what you're going to say.
Yeah.
So we brought this up towards the end of our last episode when it was just us two, and we were like, damn, that's good. Like, we've already just had a really good conversation. Let's save this one for next week.
Mm-hmm.
And I brought up a quote by Brett Bartholomew, who, if you're not familiar, like, he used to be a strength coach, and now he's more into
Coaching
I'd say,
coaches.
yeah, like he's still in coaching, but he's coaching coaches and coaching people in general. He dives really deep into like power dynamics, communication styles, like, because he thinks that that's something that's really overlooked with coaches, and I would agree.
Yeah. Like the intangibles of the person and interpersonal and intrapersonal communication and relationships.
Yeah. So I would definitely recommend his stuff. He has a podcast, a few online courses, he has a book. So, but this quote was, "Coaching is an art guided by science."
Mm-hmm.
And I think people, a lot of times we get that flipped around, like it's a science first and foremost, and then you got to have the art of the science. But he said it's an art guided by science. Um, really kind of a loaded, deep, profound quote, but to me that just means like, you know, the science, but when you're dealing with people, people skills probably come first. And there's an art to dealing with different types of people in different situations, in different environments, and that goes deep as well, because I feel like when we're trained as strength coaches, or at least how I was trained, you know, through your schooling, your internships, we talk a lot about the science and like how to train people, you know, anatomy, physiology, all this stuff, training methods, progressions, regressions, periodization, all that good stuff. The people skills part doesn't really get brought quite as much.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's because, you know, obviously whenever you're interacting with people, you're using your people skills. But I guess what I'm trying to say is we don't train that as much as we train like knowing how to program, knowing how to
Like
progress,
physiology.
knowing how to modify athletes when they're injured, knowing how to plan within the space that you have. I think that's something I knew it was important, but I was just kind of diving back into some of his stuff. And it's like, damn, like that's really, especially to go back to my situation right now, like finding ways to connect with people where they speak a different language than you, like literally, while you may not know a lot of that language. And I think that it's possible. You got to get creative though, and that's like really important to building buy-in. To go back to the whole culture thing, like that is important. So I guess what's your take on the whole art guided by science, and how do you think that shows up with your coaching, and where do you think people miss the boat, and how can you get better from there?
Don't remember who this quote is by. And if you do, cut me off and tell me. But there was an older quote that it's coming back to me right now, and it's people might not remember what you did, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. Right? And so I look back as like myself as an athlete. And I'm going to use this like short piece, but like when I switched from my senior year, finished football, transitioned to becoming a track and field athlete as a sprinter, I had my internship underneath my belt and knew the strength staff very well. I had just began learning from the sprints coach, who was the head coach at the time of the track and field program. Still the head coach, but point being, and he was friends with our head strength coach, right? That helped mend that relationship, and there was like this instant like connection, and I had the instant connection with the strength staff. When I walked into the strength staff and I was like, I'm going to train here, they said, cool, we're actually going to handle, because at the time the track coach handled all the S&C programming for the track team. He said, well, we're actually going to handle yours because you've been training with us. We're going to have that continuation. And I had one of the most advanced forms of like power cycling that I've seen in a Division II program probably in forever. But like there was that level, and like the numbers, the methods, the sets and reps, all insane. Probably one of the most well thought out, planned out programs I've ever seen in block periodization, personally. But man, coming in there, having that meeting where everyone just sat together and they said, we're going to build this around you. Just knowing that aspect where it was like, even if it didn't work, this was planned for me to be successful as a science experiment, right? As a guinea pig. They will never take that feeling away from me. Whether or not it worked or didn't work, which by the way it did, knowing that every time I either walked onto that track for practice or walked into the weight room, this was planned for me, and I had 100% buy-in from the coaches that this was going to be it. You obviously can't do that in every system, in every school, in every situation, in every scenario. I understand that. But like that's my point being, it's truly an art, and there was a level of like communication, understanding, and relationships that preceded everything that happened within the X's and O's. How do you do that on a broader scale? The easiest way to do it is build a genuine, authentic relationship with the athletes. Be yourself, care about them first. Know them, like, and I've said it to my athletes 1,000 times, person first, athlete second. Hey, you got class? What class is it? What do we got going on here? Why you got to miss practice? Is that me harassing them? No, it's, hey, I want to know what you're doing. Like, look, the practice is practice. We'll figure it out. We'll get another time. What do you got going on? You got a test? Well, cool. Do you need extra time to study? When they come back, hey, how did that test go? Tell me about, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, etc. What are you guys doing this weekend? What'd you do this past weekend? You went golfing? Where'd you go golfing? What'd you hit? How was your short game? Whatever it might be. Take those opportunities, because that will precede anything. Once you get buy-in, and I've said this 1,000 times, if you have enough buy-in from the athletes and they trust you with an unwavering amount of trust, you could have them do wall sits for 45 minutes. And if they believe that that's going to work, it's probably going to work. You get someone who's willing to run up through a brick wall for you with an unwavering amount of trust, the sky is the limit, because then there's never a doubt. They know that you have their back, and you know that they'll have your back. Boom, you're golden. Then you just fill in all the X's and O's with your scientific knowledge and the science. But that art has to precede all of it. You got to be a good person. You got to be a real person. And that has to come first. That's the art, is playing the game of people. Psychology, inter and intrapersonal communication, all of that precedes everything before you even learn a little bit about the science aspect. What about you? Like, what do you think? Like, obviously it's way different for you. Like, you have to create buy-in, because these people that you're coaching, these are, 15 to 22-year-old guys who barely speak English. You got to get buy-in, because otherwise they're just like, here we go.
Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, it's definitely challenging because I've never trained before. Baseball is everything to them. Like, the training we do is definitely not their favorite part of the day. I think getting them to realize that what we do helps make them better at baseball, which
Mm-hmm.
obviously is like the center of their entire existence, helps. I think we've been doing a better job of that with like more like educational, like presentations on like how stuff, why we're doing what we're doing. Like we had a meeting about like fourth plates with the guys. I know it sounds kind of like high level to talk about fourth plates with like teenagers, but I think we did a pretty good job of like simplifying like, hey, like this is like why we're doing this. And if these metrics increase, you're going to throw the ball harder or you're going to hit the ball harder. And that's pretty easy to understand. And then when it comes down to the actual like coaching piece, like my coaching style, I feel like changed a lot just because I was like, well, a lot of these you find out like quickly, like some kids you can kind of get on and they'll respond. But a lot of them, like if you try to like get on them about, not going low enough in the squat and putting their chest on a bench, they'll just kind of like ignore you. So I had to really like kind of like take a step back. Like it was kind of a push pull type of thing there. Tough to explain without really getting into like nitty gritty detail, but yeah, it's huge. And to think about like how people will never forget how you made them feel. I like realized the other day I was like stressing about like okay, always thinking about the future and like trying to progress. And I think for a while there I was thinking too much about like trying to progress like career wise instead of trying to think how can I make the biggest impact where I'm at? Because is there a situation where you make the biggest impact you can and don't end up progressing in your career? Probably not. You gotta make that the forefront of what you're trying to do versus just trying to get the promotion and not really trying to think about how you're making your athletes feel, how you're making the players feel.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's huge for me. And I think even like focusing less on, the methods we use down here are pretty simple. I'm not really trying to push boundaries with like programming. It's more about like how can you get guys to do simple stuff well, which is I think a lot of people's kind of viewpoint when they get athletes to start or when they get younger athletes. Um, and just trying to build relationships, like I'll try to practice my Spanish and I may fuck it up half the time, but they'll try to correct me because they're also trying to learn English. They learn a little bit, I learn a little bit. We have a laugh that kind of builds a little bit of rapport. Okay, now it's going to work. So that's how I kind of see it. It's definitely tough. I think a really good book to read is the Brett Bartholomew book. It's called Conscious Coaching. He kind of gets
Mm-hmm.
into like um he breaks it down into like archetypes. Like no one person is just completely one archetype, but you'll see like patterns in people like they act like this. These are their strengths. These are their weaknesses. These are kind of some more effective communication strategies. These are how to challenge them. These are how to address them when they're not doing what you're getting them to not doing what you're wanting them to do. So it's really fluid, changes day to day, and you've got to be really adaptive. And I think you've got to be like emotionally consistent because it gets like, especially for me, like it gets like there's times where I've just gotten like flustered and I'm like, damn, like I suck at coaching because it's like, and the like I'm sure the kids are even more frustrated because they're like, damn, like I can't understand anything this guy's saying. So, um, yeah, it's definitely more of an art than it is a science. They're both important. Um, and I think that changes based on the environment too. I think,
Mm-hmm.
from what I've heard at like higher level, like pro sports, like guys are more physically developed. It's really more about building like good relationships with them to make sure that they're still like training versus like if you have guys that are really underdeveloped, maybe you're going to run more of a strict, disciplinarian style. But I don't think you can do that without having that base of relationships, like you said. Can't just yell at people and then not give a shit about them like as people outside the weight room. That really doesn't mix, in my opinion.
No, it becomes super disingenuine and people see right through it. And like that's where I hate like the fake rah-rah stuff. Like you just be you. If you're an energizer bunny 24/7, cool, right? If you're an individual who's always calm, cool, and collected, cool. If you're a person who always is so brutally honest that when you say something, whether it be good or bad, they're like, that's the truth. Look at Gabe. I look at that. He's that last one I mentioned. He's so brutally honest. He's going to tell an athlete when something sucked, but he's also going to tell them when something was absolutely perfect, and they're going to go, "That was absolutely perfect." You know what I mean? Just be you. Cultivate a real, authentic relationship with the athletes, and it'll be smooth sailing from there, because then they know you, they know what to expect, and that way, whether you do something absolutely amazing or you do something absolutely dog shit and garbage, and you have to get chewed out for it, whatever it might be, they know that you mean it, right? And it's not just noise. It comes from the heart when you have a hard conversation or something that's incredible, right? And I think that's where people get lost in the sauce a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Enough said.
Another
You wrap
banger.
this bad boy up.
Yes, because I have to pee so bad.
You're telling me I just drank a White Monster. This thing's a piss magnet, according to. Oh yeah, you had.
They make you want to
coffee
beat. Seen some dudes drink those and go home punch. Okay?
What are you thinking on that Red Bull as far as a rating?
I just did a Red Bull last week, I think, right?
Yeah, you did.
The monk fruit.
The monk fruit one. Yep.
I gave that one a 6.9. I think that one's a little bit better than this. I think this is just a little sweet. I'm gonna give this a 6.8.
Nice.
Still classic, very good. Throw it in for a mix-up. The pink is kind of cool, being like a more like Easter, like springtime kind of can. Pink edition. Still tastes good. Little floral for my taste, but yummy, yummy. Red Bull in my tummy.
That's right.
How is a DR White Monster? This has got to go crazy.
Yeah, man. This is like, I mean, it's got to be a 10 for down here for sure.
Yeah,
like it's
has
just
to be.
elite. And even overall, I feel like the White Monster for me is like
so high.
Yeah, it's like an 8 plus. Like it's around a 9 for me. Like it's the OG. It tastes good. It's crisp. It's refreshing. Affordable. Yeah, man. I'm glad I found these. It's good.
So good. Yeah. Good for the soul, bad for the wallet.
100%.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Follow us on Instagram at bevboys.tv. You can follow us individually if you want some of our more sporting content, as well as some of the Bev Boys stuff, since we always collaborate with our posts with each other. I am BSZUTKOWSKI. That is B Shakusky. Christian can be found at
French_fit40 on Instagram there.
Bing, bang, boom, bop. Definitely follow us on subscribe to us on YouTube, like the videos. It really helps us out. We're actually at about 90 plus subscribers right now. We want to get to the big 100. That'd be a huge milestone for us. Follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Leave a review for us. Positive, please. Please don't do a negative one. That helps us kind of get boosted up into algorithms and in the charts, gets a couple more listeners. But most of all, definitely hop on to bevboys.com. Grab yourself some gear. We haven't had some new gear in a little while, so I think it's time that we start releasing some new stuff. There's a couple pieces. One got taken down. We ended up having to take down our Red Bull kind of knockoff. So we'll try another brand until we get shut down. But we'll have some new stuff coming soon too. I've been working on some new mock-ups and getting that ready for us. Christian, you got anything else?
No, guys. Appreciate you guys watching. If you did enjoy it, share it with a friend. Stay tuned for next time.
Peace.
Peace.